Good evening, everyone. This is 9/11 Freefall. I'm your host, Andy Steele. Tonight's interview is with a survivor of the 9/11 event in New York City. He was there, and this is a fairly long interview, so we're going to be jumping right into it. So before I play it for you, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that starting now. And that is 10 seconds. Despite experiencing severe emotional and physical trauma like so many thousands of survivors, this courageous individual who I have on today, who had a business in the South Tower, is speaking out for the first time on what he witnessed before, on and in the days after September 11th. He will be revealing what he saw and the process he went through to speak out about 9/11, and he's going to be speaking at the anniversary events held by AE 9/11 Truth in a few weeks, like I said, on the anniversary of 9/11 in New York. So if you have a chance to get out to New York and see him, he will be there. I highly recommend it. Sir, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, and I just want to correct one thing. I didn't own a business. I was in executive management of an entity, a corporation, down in the Ground Zero area on 9/11. The entity that I was employed by was executive management in the nonprofit sectors, which would be Director of Finance and Operations. In the private sector, it's a CFO, COO, which is Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer.
Okay, and that goes into my first question, and I just want to mention to our audience, we are withholding our guest's name for right now, but like I said, more is going to be revealed over time. This is, I think, the very first time you're even speaking out about any of this is right here on this program. Now, your place, do you want to mention what the name of the place of the employment is? I'm not sure if you just did that, and how long were you there?
Well, if I do that, and now you know my position, you'd be able to very easily learn who I am, and I want to hold that until the day of the event. But with regards to the amount of time that I was there, it was over a decade.
Okay. Now, I'm going to open the floor. I want you to tell your story. We spoke last night over the phone. Feel free to tell the story, your day, 9/11, the day before, day of, day afters, with as much detail as you want, just like you told me when we spoke the other day.
Well, as I had mentioned to you, September 11th didn't start on September 11th for me. It started on September 10th, and I commuted each day to the office down in the Ground Zero area by the World Trade Centers, and I was in the towers every day. I would come through Hoboken, down through the PATH train, get off the PATH train, down at the bottom of Tower 1. That's the way the system operated. You'd be dropped off in the bowels of Tower 1. I guess it was like 14, 16 stories down. I'm not sure if it was I don't know how many stories down it was, but as you proceeded off the PATH train, you would immediately get on the first escalator, which was very, very long. We often talked about how long it was, and if it broke down, we got stuck on it. But on September 10th, it was a normal day, like any other day, when you are in a commute in this type of environment, an hour and a half to and hour and a half back each day. Your day basically becomes a routine accounted for, every minute accounted for in the day. What was unusual on September 10th was when I came in through the PATH train with my colleagues and other friends that rode the train each and every day. And please understand, everything I share with you, there are witnesses that were present, and I'm not going to release their names. They can speak later, and you can contact them, do as you wish. You don't need me. I'll just provide you the information, and you can speak to them. On September 10th, when I proceeded onto the escalator with my briefcase in hand, let's just say X and B proceeded behind me. So there would be two on the escalator step, and I would be alone on mine. Or that day I was alone. Nobody stepped on that step with me. So I was in suit and tie, briefcase on shoulder, and in front of me were two females dressed in full Muslim garb. Now, I don't know if that's the right term, Muslim garb. They had black dress with veils. And as we proceeded up maybe 3 to 4 steps on the escalator, the one in front of me, directly in front of me, fell back on me and fainted. And it was just an instinct reaction. I dropped my brief, caught her in my arms, and carried her all the way up to the top of the escalator. And B grabbed my briefcase for me. And, of course, I'm holding this person in my arms. And we get to the top, and my first instinct was to locate Port Authority Police, a police officer, to assist me, because I'm holding dead weight in my arms. And so when I did reach the top, I said to B, follow me, carry my brief. We have to find Port Authority or the police to assist me. It took a significant amount of time to locate them, so I'm walking all around on that level with this person in my arms, trying to find the police. And at which time I did finally find one to assist me, and prior to me finding them, the female that was in my arm with the veil moved in broken English said to me, we must get out of here. We must all get out of here. We're all going to die, which gave me a shock. Anyway, I proceeded on. I found a Port Authority police officer. He said to follow him, so I'm still carrying this person with their friend. And I told the officer what they said, and then he had me follow him. He knocks on a wall, and it opens up from the inside. I learned much later that they were called the Medac vault. And the one thing I remember about the Medac vaults, when I go back and I remember, was the talk after the attacks that people were trapped down in these Medac vaults. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I was in one of those. I know where it is. I know exactly what it looks like. I was in there the day before. Inside the Medac vault, like I said, it opened out after he knocked on the wall, and me facing in. To the right, there were uniformed officers looking up at the wall, and there were screens on the wall, multiple screens, and you could tell they were security cameras. To the left side was a table, and the officer told me to set her down on that table. So I proceeded to set her down on the table, and then just quickly moved to sit there and wait. And at that time, the officer said, no, you have to leave. I said, no, I'm not leaving. I told you what she said. I'm staying here to make sure she's okay. I just carried her all the way up here. I want to make sure that she's okay. Now, the other one that was with her, and I didn't realize this because of the commotion, gone. So it was just myself and the female I put on the table, and B, who had my briefcase. The officers forced me out of the Medac. I even attempted to tell them, look, that's my girlfriend, I'm not leaving. And when I said that, they made me leave. So at that time, that's when I left, and B and I talked all about it, leaving there, and I kept telling B, it's going to be these, it's going to be these. I'm telling you, I feel it, it's going to be these. So I went through the day, and as you know, I'm right there by the New York Stock Exchange, Amex Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, all in that area, Ground Zero Financial District. And I remember in the afternoon, the buzz on the street was Rumsfeld's announcement that 2.3 trillion, and please excuse me, it's hard to breathe at time. I have the respiratory problems and things like that, so please bear with me. So I remember distinctly about Rumsfeld announcing that 2.3 trillion went into the Pentagon account and then disappeared and went out. And he was very angry because he didn't want to be blamed for it. So that I remembered specifically. And as the day progressed, I tried to reach certain numbers to try to get information as to the status of this person and to find out more about it. That was unsuccessful. So the next morning, I commuted home, came in the next morning, and you have to understand, I would get up about 4 in the morning, and I would commute in with the person that was very dear to me. And we had some plans, but I don't really want to go into that right now. Where was I? So I began the commute on September 11th. Same normal day, but the same typical chatter about threat of terrorist attack and the code and all that for the alert. So then the same people were with me that were with me on the day before. It was an everyday routine on the train. You ride these trains for over a decade. You start to see cliques on the train and things like that. Groups hang together on specific cars. I mean, you had ones that we used to refer to the drinkers, and it didn't matter if it was Monday or Friday. They'd be in their car, the drinking car, and then the card-playing car. And then you have the car where people sleep, and then you'd have the car, people like myself, who would quietly engage. Some would sleep, and some would be working on their laptop on their work, like myself. And we got into Hoboken, and the conversation was about with B and A and C and D with regards to what happened, and I couldn't find information, and I was really bothered how they kicked me out, and I couldn't find out any information. So then we proceeded through the PATH train under the Hudson River into the Trade Center and got off the PATH train. And I'm just telling you things exactly the way they happen. And you can confirm all this stuff with these witnesses. I have not spoken to them about this. They don't know anything about this interview. Nothing. Except one. So when B and I and A got on the escalator, I felt a chill go up my spine. I turned to B and A and I said, "Today's the day. Today is the day. I feel it. Today is the day. It's happening today." And of course, B, even though he lived up in the suburbs now, he was a Brooklynite, and they just have a certain way of saying things sometimes, which I don't want to say here, but the best way I could say, he said it was, I'm not going to talk that way. Just basically, get out of here, okay? So, as we proceeded up the escalators, when you get to the top in Tower 1, you then walk through the maze. It's at street level, and you walk all the way through to Tower 2, and that's where you come out on the street through the lobby doors of Tower 2, and that brings you out to Broadway and Rector, I think it is. And that whole conversation while we were walking out was about the event the day before and how I felt today was the day. And that it was going to be B's Tower. We parted ways. He headed to the stock exchange. That's where he worked, New York Stock Exchange, on the floor. And I proceeded to my office. And as I went up the elevator, we had 2 elevators. I don't want to give too much info on that. Anyway, I got to the floor of our offices, proceeded with briefcase to my office door, and when I got to the door, it was the usual, drop the briefcase, pull the keys out, open the door, and proceed in. This time, when I got to the door, my phone was ringing inside, so I hurried, and I got through the door, rushed to the desk, and instead of going around it, I just reached over and grabbed the phone and brought it, the earpiece, and brought it over to my ear. And when I answered the phone, I said, good morning, Someone speaking, how may I help you? And the person on the other side said, F you, who the are you? And I said, excuse me, who's this? And they said, it's so-and-so, who the F are you? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, get the F out of here, who are you? I said, what are you talking about? Don't give me that shit. A plane just went into the first tower. Who the F are you?
And I want to clarify for our audience, this is your friend that you were speaking to about about something's going to happen today and talking about the events of before, correct?
And he was the individual that was with me on September 10th also, carrying the brief while I was carrying this female in my arms. Okay?
Okay.
At that time, I just hung up the phone when he said Tower 1 had been hit. And I just can't tell you the feeling that went through me because someone was in there who was very dear to me. And that's when I guess I went on autopilot. And I went out my door, looked to the right, down the hallway. One of my administrative assistants was in. I yelled to him. I won't say his name. You can speak to him too. I'll give you the information. I simply said, E, come with me. And of course, he never questioned anything. If I asked of something, he just did it. At that time, he came, and I proceeded to tell him as we headed to the elevator, and we were headed down, and the entrance to our building was either the front or back. You could, well, I don't want to give that description either right now. Anyway, pardon me, we exited the back. Newsstand was on the back corner. Stopped at the newsstand, and don't ask me why I did this. I have no idea. I just did it. They had these Kodak throwaway cameras, and I got 2 of them, 3, 4, I can't remember, but I have hundreds of pictures. But anyway, got the cameras, threw them in my pockets of my suit, and we proceeded to Tower 2. As I was proceeding to Tower 2, I got to the lobby doors, got my hands, as I was proceeding to Tower 2, there were these yellow booklets raining down on us. And I remember I picked one up, and it said, New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission. And that's what it said. So I remembered that. And then I remembered a door handle to the first plane was in front of me. And I also showed it to him too. And we proceeded on. I got to Tower 2, got my hands on the door handle. And of course, I didn't know how he would react. You never know how anybody's going to react in this situation. You can know them for over a decade, but you don't know how they're going to react in situations like this. But I know he was scared to death. So when I got to Tower 2, I grabbed the door handle. At that time, I heard the second plane. Before I even turned around, I remember now saying, oh my God, I'm dead. And then everything from that point went into like slow motion. Like turning around to see, slow motion. Saying, oh my God, I'm dead. And then saying, our Father who art in heaven. And as I finally got turned all the way around, I'm watching this huge gray plane coming straight at me. And I'm going to tell you something. And there are thoughts you have, and I can tell you this right now. When something traumatic occurs to you, there are things that will stick in your head. And one of the things that raced through my mind, even though it was like slow motion, was there's no way someone's flying it. There is no way. With the thing this thing was doing, I just remember that there is no way someone's flying this thing. Maybe they're dead or whatever. but nobody's flying this thing now. You have to picture the plane's front coming at me. I'm underneath its target, Tower 2. So I'm seeing the nose. The plane is gray. There's no markings like, an airline or anything. I'm telling you now, that was not United Airlines or American Airlines. It was not. What this plane was doing, gyrating, you have to picture the wings. And you have to picture how the left wing would go way up and the right wing would come way down. And then it would switch it, pull it back the other way. And the plane was just so erratic. And I just thought it was going to fall out of the sky. Because it was not going that fast as it was coming. It was lumbering, It may have been 200, 300 miles an hour. I'm not really good at that, knowing that, but it was not going fast like it does when it's up at 25,000 feet. And as the plane was approaching me, I could see right into the front. I'm looking it down, and it goes right in above my head, and the thing blows me back. And not only was it like slow motion, it was like so surreal. It was as if the building came alive, opened its mouth, and swallowed this thing, and then burped. And out came all the flames and the debris and everything coming down. And the other thing that I remembered that amazed me so much is the way this building swallowed it and had plenty of room to go. It was just buried in my mind. And then after I had gotten blown back and got myself up, picked myself up, the first thing I did was to try to find my administrative assistant, and I started to scream out for him, to try to find him. And then I finally located him, and he was underneath a car. And at that time, I started to communicate him that I'm going in, we're going back, we got to help people. And when I turned to go back, and then I went to turn to go back to him, he was gone. So he took off. So I was by myself, headed towards it, and there were, everybody running, screaming, debris coming down. And I remember when I got back to the doors, there was a woman that was, and I want to use my words carefully with description, she was heavier than normal. She was on the ground. She was on her right side, sideways on the ground with her left arm up in the air, and the look on her face, she was in shock, and she couldn't speak, but I knew exactly what she was saying to me. And, excuse me, all I did was get her on my body and start dragging her on my body across the street and getting her to a building that had revolving doors. And it's tough enough going through revolving doors, 2 people at a time walking. I had a person on me that was dead weight, and they weren't light. I got her in there and slid her down the wall inside and told her, stay here, just stay here. You'll be safe inside here, just stay here. All the debris coming down. I left her, and then I went back outside, and there was a New York City police officer, a young guy. So I went directly to him, and he was just frozen looking up at the hole, just frozen. And that's when I realized he's in shock. So I went up to him and I started to try to talk to him. He wasn't responding. He just kept looking up. Then I started to raise my voice at him. And finally it became that I started shouting at him. You got to shake this off. You got to snap out of this. This is a terrorist attack. You got to wake up. You got to snap out of this. He didn't. And then I made the decision to start shaking him. And you got to understand something. You have to understand what was going through my mind when I did this, because he had a gun on him. And this guy's in shock, okay? But I finally did it, and I shook him, and I started screaming at him, telling him, you got to snap out of this. There's going to be suicide bombers. There's going to be vans with bombs in it. You got to snap out of this. And then I just said, I can't deal with this. He's got to snap out of it. I left him, and I went back into the building, Tower 2, and I went inside. The way Tower 2 was, when you went in these lobby doors, you'd go straight in, and then you'd bear left to get back to that area of escalators, to go back down, get on the path, and go back to Hoboken to go home at night. Well, as I proceeded down there, there's retail stores. There were retail stores. There were stores like J. Crew, Coach, Victoria's Secret. There were banks. There were jewelry stores and things of that nature. So as I'm snaking through there, I can remember that I wasn't afraid of the building coming down. That thought never crossed my mind. But what did concern me was when I was watching that plane come straight at me and go into the tower, it felt like an earthquake underneath my feet. Like it was an explosion or something, and it was from underneath. So I'm in the towers now, and I'm snaking back that way to try to get up to get to them. And as I went past the jewelry stores, I saw some things that scared the living daylights out of me, and I'll just leave it at that. And I turned around and started going back the other way. And you have to realize the debris and everything was coming down on us, and it was very dangerous, but I realize now that I was on autopilot. So my sense of fear was gone. I just was on autopilot, just getting people away. The debris was coming down. And after I had been doing that for a while, I realized, oh my God, my employees, and you have to understand something. You had people hysterical on the street, and you have to realize I was on the south side. I wasn't on the north side. I was on the south side of those towers. And the things that I'm going to tell you, you have to realize people didn't see. Everything you've seen has been shown to you from like Midtown looking down. There were those of us on the south side, and we were trapped. We were worrying about later on, because then you started hearing this stuff like 13 more planes coming, and then some people would be saying the towers are going to fall over and things like that. And there was only one way for the people on the south side to get out, and that way involved going across Broadway down in the financial district, which runs down by the Bowl, and then going down the back streets heading towards South Street Seaport, and then taking that up, going across the Brooklyn Bridge or going up to the Empire State Building. And I remember one thing that upset me greatly was how long it took for those F-16s or 15s, whatever they were, to show up. And I remember that because I remember at first when we heard them, we didn't know what it was, so we thought maybe it was more planes, but then we realized it was them. And I was like, where the hell were they before? What? You know, I just was very angry about it. And then I had to make a decision. Oh my God, my employees, there's more planes coming. They're on the top. I got to go back. I got to go up. I got to climb. I got to get them. And you have to also realize that the firemen and everything, when all this was going on, they hadn't gotten there yet. This is right when it happened. And this is Tower 2, the second plane. And then I finally made a decision. I'm going back. And I had to climb up to the top. And you have to understand something. You have to realize what it's like when you're coming down stairwell inside of these buildings and how long they are. And there's no light. And it's dark. And all the soot and the fear and having to get all these employees out, because you have a mix. You have older ones. You have some that are overweight, not in good physical shape. And then you have younger ones and things like that. It was very, very difficult. And then deciding whether or not to exit them out the lobby into the streets was a very difficult decision too, because at that time, our mindset, terrorist attacks, more planes coming, I was thinking suicide vans. If they're doing this, then they already have people set up with vans with bombs in them. They're going to wait for everybody to try to exit from the south side, because there was only one way to go, so you'd have tens of thousands of people going at the same time down the same route. So that I feared. So I didn't want to escort them at the same time everybody else was going. I wanted to let it sit out and then proceed to take them. And then when I started to proceed to take them out and we started to go along, one of the towers came down. And I'm sure you've seen those plumes of it coming at the people in the streets. So we were dealing with that. But as I was walking them and leading them which way to go and trying to count all them and know that they were all, I had them all, and there were some missing, of course. But you have to just keep going with who you have, because I was going to go back anyway. As we were proceeding down, I saw an individual. We all saw this individual dressed up in like Muslim cleric clothes, carrying 2 gym bags. At which time, one of my employees collapsed. So we had to carry him. And that time, I decided to put all the employees in a building we were going by, and I told them all to stay inside there and to wait 5 or 10 minutes. If I don't come back, just keep going towards the South Street Streetport and just start heading up to the Empire State Building.
Now, before you go on, I just want to ask you, which direction was this guy in the Muslim clothing? Which direction was he going in? Where was he walking?
Well, this is why it struck me very odd, and you have to understand the mental state of everybody. You got 2 planes going into the towers. You have chaos. And I already had that experience the day before. And then I see this, and they have gym bags. And we're walking, everybody's going this way to get out. And this guy's walking calm, cool, and collective, headed the other way, towards the towers. And that's when one of the employees collapsed, carried them, and that's when I said, everybody in this building. And I put them all in there, and then I came out, and I proceeded back to confront this individual. And I just say that there was nothing in the gym bag. And they said they were going to the Bowling Green station, which was 2 stops down from the towers at that time. So if you got on one of the trains down in the towers in your commute, because you have to realize there's a train station in the World Trade Centers down on the, not on the bottom, the bottom was the PATH trains, but then you'd come up the other levels from the escalators, and then you'd have all the train stations coming in from Grand Central. Mm-hmm. You know, you'd have those trains coming in and everything. So anyway, I think it was the 1-4 train, which came out of the towers, and it would stop at Rector, and then it would go to Bowling Green Station. That was the station. And I really don't want to get into that much more. And then I went back, proceeded to get them going up the street, and then we saw some things. For example, one guy running up away from the towers on the sidewalk opposite us, covered in the soot. And you have to realize we were covered in soot. And you got to also imagine thousands of people on the sidewalks, in the streets, running away. And then all of a sudden we see this one guy with a briefcase, didn't have his suit on, his jacket on, he had his white shirt and his tie. And he's covered in soot. And we're looking across the other side, so he's running up, and then we look up and we see a woman with a skirt on, and she's running down, and they're screaming, and then all of a sudden they come together and meet, hugging and everything. So they were husband and wife. So we saw some things that were very powerful, okay? And of course, as I told you before, the bodies dropping, the debris, the people jumping out, and the bodies hitting the ground, and watching them jumping out, things of that nature. I haven't said much about the pictures. I don't want to here. Never been released, never been made public, but they've now been given to people to proceed with as they wish.
Did you described what you felt? You felt explosions underneath you. Did you see anything that would indicate explosions going off? If so, can you describe it?
Well, when I finally woke up and started dealing with this stuff, what brought it about was my attempt to try to finally move forward and deal with it instead of running from it. And I went to my first memorial finally, and that was in 2012. And it wasn't good because it opened up Pandora's box. And that's when everything came out. And that's when I started going through the boxes. And that's when I started looking at the pictures. And it all came back. And when that tower gave away, the fire was out. And I'm going to repeat myself. When Tower 2 came down, and you have to realize this, Tower 1 was hit first. Tower 2 was hit second. Tower 2 came down first. When Tower 2 came down, the fire was out. I'm not going to tell you why or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you the fire was out. And there's some other things that I don't think I should go into. But I'm telling you this, the fire was out. And I'm going to tell you that the first thing that occurred when that tower gave away at the top were explosions that went off horizontally. And it was like a machine gun. Pop, 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 and it went sideways across it. And then as it was coming down, you'd hear it slapping for each floor, and then you'd be hearing the pop, 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 and you'd hear explosions and stuff like that.
Now, I just want to let everybody know, and I want to just ask you, because you're a signatory on the petition of AE911truth.org calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the buildings. And again, go into as much or as little detail as you feel comfortable with at this point. But why did you sign that petition? Why are you calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the Twin Towers in Building 7?
You have to understand that I had many injuries, spinal, respiratory. You have to understand that many of us that were right in it, right in the epicenter, right inside the attack, that I've learned now, I shut down for about 11 years. You couldn't talk to me about it. I never looked at anything. I never viewed anything. I didn't let my employees, gave them off 2 months because our building was there, it was closed. Gave them off 2 months. Just don't even worry about it. And we had an administration putting us into a military state mentally. And our view was, we're attacked, we're at war, we all must do our part. We may not be in a ditch over there with a gun, but we have to support just like our military is. And we basically became warriors. That's what we became, that we will survive. When they were saying things like, you got to spend money, you got to save the business, you got to keep it going, we basically became warriors too. And there were things that I look back now, not emotional, not traumatized. Yes, when I realize it, I become very angry. I become angry with myself because I was in it. I saw it all, but I shut down. But I saw it with my own eyes. I saw everything. But I shut down, and I went into this autopilot, and it was just about surviving, doing your duty for your country. That was the mental state, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. But I sacrificed so much. I ignored my health. I ignored my doctors. Just give me the antibiotics. Just give me the damn things. Don't you understand? We're at war. And I would start every 4 hours throughout the day. Because if I would lay down from exhaustion and go to sleep, my mind would take off. The nightmares would start. I'd see that plane going in above my head. Every single time it would play over and over and over. Every night for 6 months. So you don't want to go to sleep anymore. And your lungs are shutting down. And then you're hearing them put out announcements that the air quality's fine, the air quality's fine. And, you're dependent on these things when you're in executive management because you're directing your employees, based on information that you're being given. You're making these decisions based on this, but yet you're seeing it, the smell. You have no idea what the smell was like the next morning, 7 a.m. on the streets down there, with the sewage and the bodies and the aluminum and the asbestos and the concrete dust and every other thing you can imagine, all burning and burning. And that fire did not go out for at least 6 months. I saw it every day. It did not go out for 6 months. At least till March 2002. And some of the things, like I said, looking back, and as I said, pictures have been given just in case something happens to me. They're gone. That now, in a more rational state, I see it clearly. How did they get these human car washes, and why was it such a priority?
Well, and I don't think you've told that story, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I don't think you've shared that part of it, of coming into New Jersey. Can you share with our audience what you experienced when you got to Hoboken?
Yeah, after going back, because I told my employees after we got them segregated, and those over Brooklyn and those up at the Empire, and telling them how to go about it and everything, that's when I went back. And then later, finally proceeding over, you get on the New York waterway boats, and the New York waterway boats were already in operation. When you got into Hoboken in the morning on your commute, you could take the PATH train, you could take a bus, or you could take the New York waterway, which were boats, okay? And you would get on the boats. They were like taxis. And they would bring you over, right over by the American Express building was, where it was the Winter Garden, or you'd come around the bottom of Battery Park and you'd come around on the other side, over by South Street Seaport. So those boats, they were able to use, but they didn't allow access to them, of course, down by Ground Zero because, well, you had 2 buildings come down on you, 1 billion pounds each, and that's the other times when it felt like an earthquake under my feet. And you felt that too. And it was like what happened as the plane was going in above my head. But the thing that really, really pissed me off was we're on these boats and we're covered with soot. We get to Hoboken and the boat pulls into dock and we start to get off it like cattle. And you have to understand our state of mind. How are we getting home? Are there trains running? We didn't know what to expect. But when we got over there, and right where you got off the boat, they set up these, like, corrugated. When you got off, you had a fence on your left side, your right side. You could tell they moved them right in, and anybody and everybody getting off of that was forced to go down this. And I remember I was so upset. I was so angry. I was so traumatized because I didn't feel it was right to leave. That when I got off and stepped down, I tried to go right, step between the fence where it met where the boat was, and just ignore it. I was like, I'm not dealing with this crap. And I tried to go through it. And that's when the military, they had military there in uniform with guns. And the guy stopped me, grabbed me, and then forced me to go down through the thing. And I told him, you know, what I was doing. He says, you got to go over here, but he didn't tell me why. And then when we got inside there, they had already had a, what I called was a human car wash set up. And they made all of us go through this thing with all our clothes on. And I remember going through it, soaking wet, just like a car wash. And I'm thinking, what are they going to have us to change into? Well, I get to the other side. There's no tables, no support people, nothing. So I found somebody. I said, where are the clothes we're going to change into? Don't you have anything? I can't even walk. I had dress shoes on that were filled with water. And they simply said, there's nothing. Just go get on your train. That's how they treated us. Just go get on your train. So now you're soaking wet. I had dress shoes on, and every time I took a step, it would squeeze like a squeegee. That's how bad it was. And then you're going to get on these trains that are freezing cold from the air conditioning on them, which the conductors, we used to always complain about it because they said they had no control over it, and it would be freezing on them. So you're headed home, and you're freezing, and your teeth are chattering, and you're thinking about all this. You're traumatized, and everything that's happening. I think I got home. It may have been around 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. I can't remember the exact time. And then I remember I had my 2 dogs. Couldn't sleep. My eyes closed. I'd see the planes going in. At 7 a.m., I was back down there. And what I saw, another thing that I look back now, because I have pictures of this, they had fences already put up around the whole area.
Obviously, you've seen the controlled demolition evidence laid out. You signed the petition. What do you have to say to those in government and media who dismiss the forensic evidence of controlled demolition that AE 9/11 Truth presents and just regard it as conspiracy theory? They won't look into it. They've been told what the story was, and they won't look into the event any further. What do you have to say to that kind of attitude?
If you believe in your heart of hearts, in your soul of soul, that what you say or what they say is so true, then what do you have to fear? You're not the one suffering. You're not the families that lost people that are suffering. You're not the ones that are sick, ill. You're not the ones not getting help. If you're so sure of this, then why not let it be done again the right way and let the truth fall where it may? If you're so sure of it, then why don't you satisfy us and show us If you believe it's so much, then why not allow the right kind of investigation, the one that should have occurred, not fencing it in and shipping all the stuff to China? That was a criminal scene. That mayor had an obligation, and he was an attorney. He knows what his obligations were. So why not satisfy everybody, including yourself, and let it be? Why not release these 28 pages to the American public? Those of you that doubt and say the things you say, why would you be against releasing 28 pages that provide tremendous, most important information, not only to every citizen in this country, but everything on foreign policy, on protecting this nation? Here we are, August again, and we're hearing the same kind of chatter that we did in 2001. Just 2 days ago, Britain announced it fears a 9/11 attack. It's all the same thing. It's deja vu. So why wouldn't you want to know what you should be allowed to know, what's in those 28 pages that Walter Jones has put his life on to bring forward, Congressman of North Carolina, under Resolution 428? Why doesn't every American citizen in this country call their senator and their congressman and say, sir, I understand you have the right to read these documents, even though they're classified. You have the right to go read them. I understand you're not allowed to bring your phone when you go down there to read them, and you're watched over by 2 guards, and you can't bring a camera, and you can't bring a pen and a pad. But I just want you to read them, sir, because if something happens, you're responsible. If you're a senator of a state, a congressman of a district, your first priority and responsibility is the security of this country and your constituents. There is absolutely no excuse, no reason why every single senator and congressman in this country has not taken the time, gone and read those pages, and then communicated to their constituents. It's absolute insanity. And again, I simply say, prove it. If you have nothing to fear and you're so sure of it, then just do it. That's all I'm asking. Don't we at least deserve that after all the sacrifice we've made? All the military men and women that have died and are crippled and have lost their faces and their limbs, don't they at least deserve that? That's what I have to say.
Now, in your mind, in your view, speaking directly to Congress, who might be listening to this episode, who knows, what does a real investigation look like? What is the first thing that they should do to, beyond Walter Jones's situation there with the 28 pages, what is the first thing that should happen to reopening in 9/11 and looking into what really happened that day?
Well, first and foremost, you don't take people that have lost loved ones and are traumatized and almost got killed and jam them like cattle through a human car wash and not even give them something to change in. That was evidence. That should not have happened. You don't discard of debris and stop searching for people. I have a friend they found 3 days later under the rubble. Now, this needs to be done. I believe in my heart many of the things that are occurring today are because of 9/11, because the investigation wasn't done, because debris wasn't moved. A crime scene is always secured. Everything there. The first thing that should have been done was the debris analyzed for explosives. That doesn't take a rocket scientist. This was a terrorist attack. You said it was a terrorist attack. Why wouldn't you, the first thing you do, look for explosives? You have tens of thousands of people dying, the respiratory diseases and the illnesses. Look, this isn't rocket scientists. This is very simple, very straightforward. And I think our biggest question should be why? What is behind it all? But they have an obligation to this country first and foremost, not themselves. And when they are elected and they took that oath, they swore to that obligation.
What are you afraid happens if we don't investigate 9/11 or reinvestigate it if they want to claim that the first thing was an investigation? People will beg to differ on that. But what are you afraid happens if we don't get to the bottom of what really happened that day for the country and just for our world, too?
When I finally woke up and I started looking at my things that had been put away, and I don't have them now, they're away, law firm protecting them. When I started to look at these things, what I realized was the next one's going to be much bigger. And that's not a fear. That's a reality.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before I conclude the show tonight, our guest, after the interview was finished, wrote to me, and there were some things in the interview that he wasn't sure he had communicated or he didn't include when he was speaking. Obviously, this is a very emotional thing for him to come forward about and remember back to that tragic day. So he has a statement that he wanted me to include in this program, and I wanted to include it here at the end. This was from our guest tonight. He writes, "As a 9/11 survivor that suffered from illnesses, injuries, and loss of loved ones, I realize now how traumatized I was from the attacks, and now, after much thought and due diligence, let it be known that I, as well as many other 9/11 survivors, support open public trials for the hijackers and all other accused terrorists and individuals suspected and claimed to have been part of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center complex buildings on September 11th, 2001. This includes all individuals placed in Guantanamo prison in Cuba that were there and released, and those still kept there without and with so-called military trials. After almost a decade, I realized that the best and only way to seek and find the truth is for the trials to occur, and the 28 pages that have been classified and kept from all Americans be released immediately, and Resolution 428 be passed. Also, I request that a new, open, and transparent scientific investigation be performed with regard to the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center complex, especially the two towers and Building 7, which was not hit by a plane, but yet fell at a rate of free fall and assimilated in all aspects a controlled demolition using explosives. As a 9/11 survivor who witnessed personally the second plane flying into Tower 2 above my head as I held the door handles to the lobby doors, and personally witnessed the explosions in Tower 2, I request that all of the above be done immediately." This is going to conclude tonight's episode of 9/11 Freefall. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific, and you can download the MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.